Chapter 1. You ever notice how a woman can be sitting right next to you, smiling, talking, even enjoying the moment, and there's still this quiet space between what she's saying and what she actually wants from you? You feel it sometimes, but you can't quite explain it. The conversation is normal, the vibe is good, nothing is technically wrong, and yet there's this sense that there's something unspoken moving underneath the surface. Most men brush past that feeling because they're focused on the obvious parts of the interaction, the words, the plans, the logistics. Meanwhile, she's watching something else entirely, something quieter, something that lives in how you move rather than what you say. And if you're honest with yourself, you've probably felt that moment where she suddenly lights up around a man who didn't really say anything extraordinary. You're standing there thinking, what did he even do? He didn't compliment her more than you did. He didn't try harder than you did. He just carried himself a certain way, and that small shift in energy made the entire room feel different. It's confusing if you're looking for instructions. It starts making sense when you realize that a lot of what women respond to lives in behavior that never gets verbally requested. That's the strange part about attraction. The things that move it forward are rarely spoken out loud. A woman might say she wants communication, respect, honesty, stability, and all of those things matter in their own way. But underneath those surface words, there's a deeper layer of behavior she watches quietly. She's observing whether you step into moments or wait for permission. She's noticing whether you hold a direction or float wherever the interaction goes. None of that shows up in a list she hands you. It reveals itself through how she reacts. You might remember a time when a woman seemed slightly distant, and you tried filling the space with more talking, more explaining, more reassurance. The more effort you added, the more the energy felt like it was slipping through your fingers. That moment frustrates a lot of men because effort feels like it should solve the problem. Yet there are times when effort creates the opposite effect. The tension grows heavier. The conversation becomes slightly forced, and you walk away wondering what invisible rule you broke. What's actually happening in those moments has less to do with rules and more to do with instincts she's reading subconsciously. Women are incredibly perceptive about emotional direction. If the energy feels uncertain, if your decisions wobble, if you constantly look toward her reactions before moving forward, she registers that shift almost instantly. She might not articulate it clearly. She might not even fully understand it herself. The response still shows up in how she behaves around you. Sometimes that response appears as curiosity. Sometimes it appears as hesitation. Sometimes she begins leaning in more. Sometimes she begins leaning away. The interesting thing is that most of those reactions start long before any explicit conversation about expectations ever happens. That's why the phrase, "women want this," or "women like that," often sounds confusing when men hear it online, because it gets presented like a checklist when the reality is far more fluid. Think about the times a woman seemed deeply comfortable around you, even when the conversation wasn't particularly impressive. Maybe you were sitting somewhere quiet, talking about random things, and she kept finding reasons to extend the moment. The atmosphere felt calm, steady, slightly magnetic without either of you trying too hard to make it happen. Those moments reveal something important about attraction. The energy of how you show up shapes the emotional temperature of the interaction. Women rarely sit down and say, "I need you to behave in this specific way." They simply respond to how you move. The way you walk into a room, the way you decide where to go next, the way you carry silence without scrambling to fill it, the way you treat your own time. Those subtle signals build a picture in her mind about what it feels like to exist inside your world. And when that picture feels stable, interesting, and grounded, curiosity starts growing naturally. She doesn't have to consciously think through it. Her body language changes, her attention sharpens, conversations stretch longer. You feel the difference in how she looks at you. That shift isn't created by memorizing lines or performing tricks. It grows out of behaviors she quietly hopes to see but rarely asks for directly. That's what this entire conversation is really about. Those quiet behaviors. The things women appreciate deeply even though they almost never sit down and spell them out. A lot of men spend years trying to decode female communication through what's spoken. Meanwhile, the strongest signals live underneath the words, woven into how interactions unfold in real time. You've probably experienced flashes of this without realizing it. A woman who suddenly became more attentive after you made a decision confidently. A moment where she relaxed when you didn't react emotionally to something small. A shift in her energy when you focused on your own plans without needing constant reassurance from her. Those moments carry information about what she feels safe responding to. It doesn't mean women are mysterious puzzles that need solving. It means attraction tends to grow in spaces where certain emotional conditions exist. Stability, direction, calm, certainty, presence. When those conditions appear naturally in a man, women often respond with warmth and curiosity without ever needing to ask for it. There's a reason some men walk into rooms and conversations seem to orbit around them effortlessly. It isn't magic, and it isn't luck. It's a collection of small behaviors that communicate something powerful without words. When those behaviors show up, a woman begins imagining what life might feel like around that man long before any relationship conversation happens. If you're watching this and thinking about moments where women reacted differently to you than you expected, stay with that thought for a second. You might already recognize pieces of what we're talking about. Sometimes the smallest shift in how you carry yourself changes the entire direction of an interaction. And if this topic feels familiar already, if you've sensed those quiet dynamics before, but never heard them explained in a way that actually feels real, take a second to tap the like button and let me know in the comments what moment first made you realize women respond to things they never say out loud. A lot of guys have had that realization at some point. It's one of those experiences that suddenly makes years of confusion start connecting together. The truth is, the most powerful things women want from you often live in your presence rather than your performance. They show up in the way you move through life and the way you carry yourself when nobody is asking anything from you. Once you start recognizing that layer, conversations with women begin feeling different, calmer, more natural, less like a puzzle you're trying to solve and more like a rhythm you're stepping into. And when that rhythm begins to settle in, something interesting happens. You stop chasing approval. You stop trying to impress constantly. The interaction becomes more relaxed, and ironically, the relaxation tends to draw women closer rather than pushing them away. That shift alone reveals something important about attraction. The things women quietly want from a man rarely involve him trying harder. They involve him becoming more solid in the way he already exists. Chapter 2. There are moments where the conversation slows down, where neither of you are saying much, and the silence stretches for a few seconds longer than you expected. A lot of men rush to fill that space immediately. They reach for another topic, another question, another joke just to keep the interaction moving. The instinct comes from a good place. You don't want the moment to feel awkward. You want her to stay engaged. Yet something interesting happens when a man doesn't scramble to repair those quiet seconds. The atmosphere shifts in a way that's hard to describe, almost like the interaction has more weight to it. Women rarely say this out loud, yet they notice very quickly how a man behaves when the energy pauses. If you look uncomfortable with silence, if your voice speeds up to avoid stillness, she feels the tension inside that reaction. If you stay relaxed, if you let the moment breathe and look at her calmly, like the pause belongs there, something deeper happens. She senses that you're not dependent on constant validation from the interaction. That feeling changes the entire tone of how she experiences you. Instead of feeling like the conversation is something fragile that needs constant maintenance, she begins experiencing it as something steady. It gives the interaction space to expand naturally. Her thoughts slow down. Her attention sharpens. The small expressions in her face become easier to read. It's strange how powerful quiet confidence can feel when it appears naturally. Women almost never ask a man to demonstrate it. They don't sit down and say they wish he would relax more in the silence. The reaction still happens when they see it. You can watch it unfold in real time if you pay attention to body language. Her posture softens slightly. Her eyes linger a little longer. Her responses become more playful. You might remember a moment where you were with a woman and the interaction felt effortless. You weren't calculating every word. The conversation moved at a slower rhythm. The pauses didn't feel like mistakes. They felt like part of the experience. Those interactions often become memorable because they feel authentic. Neither person is performing constantly. A lot of men spend years believing attraction grows through constant verbal effort. They believe the right line, the right compliment, the right clever remark is what makes a woman feel drawn in. Those things can be fun in small doses, yet the deeper magnetism usually appears in the way a man carries calm presence. Think about how rare that calm presence actually is. Most people move through conversations slightly anxious about how they're being perceived. They monitor reactions. They adjust themselves constantly. That emotional noise creates subtle tension inside interactions. When someone shows up without that noise, it feels refreshing. Women pick up on that immediately. There's another behavior women quietly respond to that rarely gets mentioned openly. It's the ability to decide things without turning every moment into a negotiation. You've probably been in situations where a group of people spends 10 minutes trying to decide where to eat. Everyone throws out options, nobody commits to one, and the conversation circles endlessly. When a man simply says, "Let's go here," with a calm certainty, people usually follow. That simple decision-making energy has a similar effect in dating interactions. Women are used to men asking, "What do you want to do?" repeatedly. The question sounds polite, yet over time it signals uncertainty. When a man has a sense of direction about the moment, the interaction flows differently. It feels organized without feeling controlling. Women rarely sit across from a man and say, "I wish you would lead the moment more," yet they respond strongly when they feel that direction. Plans come together smoothly. The evening feels intentional. There's a subtle sense that someone is steering the experience instead of letting it drift randomly. This kind of presence doesn't require dominance or loud authority. In fact, the strongest version of it usually appears quietly. A man makes a decision and moves forward with it calmly. He doesn't look around the room for approval. He doesn't apologize for choosing something. He simply treats the moment like it belongs to him. You might have noticed how women react to that energy even outside romantic contexts. Watch a group dynamic sometime. The man who moves through the room with calm certainty tends to become the center of attention naturally. He isn't demanding it. People gravitate toward it because stability feels comfortable. When that same stability appears in a one-on-one interaction, attraction often grows without needing dramatic gestures. A woman begins relaxing into the experience. She feels like the moment has structure without pressure. That environment allows her personality to come out more freely. One of the quiet things women want from men is that emotional steadiness. They want to feel like the atmosphere around you is grounded. They don't usually phrase it that way, yet the feeling matters deeply. If your energy swings constantly depending on small reactions, the interaction begins feeling unpredictable. When your energy stays consistent, the connection begins feeling safe and intriguing at the same time. That balance between calm direction and relaxed presence becomes incredibly attractive. It allows the conversation to unfold naturally. You're not forcing excitement, and you're not waiting passively for things to happen either. You're simply guiding the moment while staying present inside it. If you're listening to this and thinking back to interactions where the energy shifted unexpectedly, there's a good chance this dynamic was involved somehow. Maybe the moment improved when you stopped trying so hard to entertain. Maybe she leaned closer when you spoke more slowly and confidently. Those small changes create ripple effects that build attraction quietly. Sometimes men overlook these dynamics because they're subtle. There's no dramatic signal announcing that a woman appreciates calm leadership or quiet confidence. The signal appears in her behavior instead. She becomes more attentive. The conversation stretches longer. She finds reasons to stay present in the moment. If you've ever noticed a woman becoming more engaged when you relaxed into your natural rhythm instead of chasing approval, you've already witnessed this dynamic in action. It's one of those things that feels obvious once you see it, yet many men spend years missing it because they're focused on the surface level of the interaction. And if this idea resonates with you right now, if you're remembering a moment where slowing down actually made the interaction stronger, leave a quick comment and share that experience. A lot of men discover this shift the same way, through a moment where they stopped performing and realized the connection actually deepened. The interesting part is that these behaviors don't require you to become someone different. They simply require awareness of the atmosphere you bring into an interaction. When that atmosphere feels calm, directed, and grounded, women often respond in ways they never verbally explain. Chapter 3. You might not realize how much women observe the way you treat your own life when they're around you. There's a difference between describing ambition and embodying direction, and women pick up on that difference almost immediately. A man can speak confidently about his goals all night, yet if his behavior suggests his time is constantly flexible and easily rearranged for anyone who asks, the message beneath the words becomes something else entirely. What women quietly want from a man, something they almost never phrase directly, is the sense that his life already has gravity, that his days move with intention even when no one is watching. When a man treats his time with care, when he moves through his routines with quiet purpose, it creates a subtle environment around him that feels structured and real. A woman stepping into that environment feels like she's entering something that already exists, rather than something that depends on her attention to function. That difference shapes attraction more than most men realize. When a woman senses that a man's direction is stable, she doesn't feel responsible for giving his life momentum. She feels invited into a world that already has movement. That feeling allows curiosity to grow naturally. She begins wondering where that direction leads, what it feels like to be part of that rhythm. You can see the opposite dynamic play out all the time. A man meets a woman he finds attractive, and suddenly every part of his schedule opens up around her. Plans change, priorities shift, time rearranges itself instantly. From his perspective, he's being attentive and available. From her perspective, something subtle begins to feel unstable. The life she initially saw in him begins orbiting around her attention instead of continuing on its own path. Women rarely say they want a man who protects his time. It still registers when they see it. When a man says he can meet tomorrow because tonight he's focused on something important to him, the interaction takes on a different tone. His attention feels valuable because it's not endlessly flexible. The moment he does spend with her begins feeling more intentional. This dynamic doesn't require arrogance or emotional distance. It grows out of self-respect. When you treat your own direction seriously, other people start feeling that seriousness naturally. Women respond to it with a kind of quiet admiration. It makes them curious about the parts of your life they haven't seen yet. You might remember an interaction where a woman seemed slightly more attentive after realizing you had plans that didn't revolve around her. That moment isn't about creating artificial scarcity. It's about authenticity. A man who genuinely values his path doesn't abandon it the moment someone attractive appears. The steadiness of that behavior communicates something powerful about his identity. There's a deeper layer inside this dynamic as well. Women want to feel like a man chooses them rather than needing them. The emotional difference between those two experiences is enormous. When a woman senses that your happiness depends on her approval, she begins feeling pressure she didn't ask for. When she senses that your life already has direction and you're inviting her into it intentionally, the experience feels lighter and more exciting. That sense of choice creates attraction quietly. She feels seen and appreciated without feeling responsible for sustaining your emotional balance. Conversations become more playful. Interactions carry a subtle sense of curiosity. The connection unfolds more naturally because it isn't being pushed forward by urgency. You may notice how different the atmosphere feels when you're talking to someone while fully grounded in your own priorities. Your voice sounds calmer, your posture changes, your reactions become less reactive because your world doesn't hinge on the outcome of that single interaction. Women pick up on that stability quickly. It feels reassuring and intriguing at the same time. The interesting thing about this behavior is that women rarely sit down and say they wish men valued their own time more. It's something they respond to instinctively. The moment they see a man with clear direction, they begin imagining what it would feel like to move through life beside that kind of energy. There's a quiet respect that forms when a woman realizes you won't abandon your priorities simply to maintain her attention. It signals emotional maturity. It tells her that the life you're building has structure. That structure makes the interaction feel grounded rather than fragile. One man shared a story that illustrates this dynamic perfectly. He'd been seeing someone for a few weeks and the connection felt easy. One evening she asked if he wanted to meet up last minute. He told her he had already committed to working on a project he cared about that night, and he suggested another day instead. There was no apology in his tone, just calm certainty. She paused for a moment, smiled, and said she respected that he stuck to his plans. Their connection grew noticeably stronger after that moment. What she responded to wasn't rejection or distance. She responded to the clarity of his priorities. It showed her that his life had shape. That small interaction revealed something important about the kind of man he was becoming. Stories like that appear all the time when men begin protecting their direction. Women respond to the energy of a man who is building something meaningful. It feels different from the energy of someone who waits for life to happen. The difference isn't dramatic on the surface. It lives in small decisions repeated consistently. If you're watching this and thinking about your own habits, consider how often you rearrange your life around someone you've only known for a short time. That pattern feels generous in the moment, yet over time it can erode the very qualities that made you interesting in the first place. Women feel drawn to men who seem anchored in something deeper than the interaction itself. They want to sense that there's momentum behind your life. When that momentum exists, the time you choose to spend with them feels deliberate rather than automatic. If you've ever experienced a moment where a woman became more curious after realizing you had your own path unfolding, you've already seen this principle at work. It's one of those quiet behaviors that rarely gets explained directly, yet its impact shows up again and again in how attraction develops. And if this idea resonates with you right now, if you're remembering a time when protecting your time actually strengthened a connection rather than weakening it, share that experience in the comments. Hearing those moments from other men often helps people recognize the patterns in their own interactions. Women may never sit down and say they want a man whose life already moves with purpose. They respond strongly when they feel that presence. It gives the interaction weight. It gives the connection a sense of direction before any relationship conversation even begins. Chapter 4. Sometimes the moment that changes everything between a man and a woman is so small that nobody else in the room even notices it. It isn't loud. It isn't dramatic. It's a subtle moment where she watches how you respond to something unexpected. Maybe someone interrupts you while you're speaking. Maybe she challenges something you said. Maybe the conversation drifts somewhere slightly uncomfortable. The way you carry yourself in that moment quietly reveals a lot about the kind of man you are. Women rarely say this directly, yet they pay close attention to how a man handles pressure in ordinary situations. Those little moments show them whether your emotional state stays steady or whether it wobbles when something unexpected appears. A man who remains calm in those moments creates a powerful atmosphere around him. The conversation doesn't need to stop. His voice doesn't need to rise. His reactions stay measured, and the interaction continues moving forward without unnecessary friction. That kind of emotional stability sends a message far stronger than anything he could say about himself. It tells her that his inner world has structure, that he doesn't crumble when situations become slightly uncomfortable, that he can hold his presence even when the environment shifts around him. Those qualities feel incredibly reassuring to a woman, even if she never explains why. You might think women are mostly watching the romantic gestures you make or the compliments you give them. Those things matter in their own way. The deeper layer of attraction often forms when she sees how you move through moments that aren't perfectly smooth. Imagine a simple situation. You're sitting together somewhere, and she teases you lightly about something you said earlier. Some men react immediately by defending themselves or over-explaining. The atmosphere becomes slightly tense because the reaction carries a hint of insecurity. When a man smiles, acknowledges the comment, and stays relaxed, the energy shifts completely. The teasing moment becomes playful rather than awkward. That difference feels small on the surface. Underneath it, a woman senses emotional resilience. She feels that she can express herself freely without triggering instability in the man sitting across from her. That emotional freedom becomes incredibly attractive over time. Women want to feel like they can be expressive around a man without constantly worrying about managing his reactions. They want to feel like the emotional environment around him is steady enough to hold different moods, different conversations, different experiences. When a man demonstrates that steadiness naturally, a deeper level of comfort begins forming inside the interaction. That comfort doesn't mean the connection becomes boring. In fact, it often allows more personality to emerge. When she senses that your emotional presence is grounded, she begins sharing more of her thoughts, her humor, her perspective. The interaction expands because she feels safe enough to be herself. It's interesting how often attraction grows through these quiet signals rather than through dramatic efforts to impress. Women rarely sit across from a man and say they hope he handles tension with calm confidence. They respond strongly when they experience it in real time. You might have experienced this dynamic yourself without realizing it. A moment where you stayed relaxed instead of reacting emotionally, and suddenly, the entire conversation felt lighter. The interaction flowed more smoothly. Her energy became more playful. Those subtle shifts reveal how much emotional stability matters in attraction. Another layer of this dynamic involves how a man treats people around him. Women watch the way you interact with waiters, friends, strangers, even people who disagree with you. Those interactions create a broader picture of your character. They reveal whether your confidence depends on controlling situations or whether it grows from something deeper. When a man treats others with calm respect while still holding his own boundaries, it creates an atmosphere that feels mature and secure. Women notice that energy quickly. It tells them that the man they're talking to carries himself the same way, regardless of who he's interacting with. That consistency feels powerful. It means the version of you she's seeing isn't just a performance designed to impress her. It's a genuine expression of how you move through the world. Authenticity like that feels rare in environments where people constantly adjust themselves to gain approval. One story captures this idea in a way many men recognize. A guy once described being out with a woman when another man approached and tried to dominate the conversation with loud jokes and attention-seeking behavior. Instead of competing for attention, he stayed relaxed, continued speaking calmly, and kept his focus on the woman he was with. She later told him that the moment he didn't react defensively made her feel incredibly comfortable around him. She wasn't impressed by a display of dominance. She responded to the steadiness of his presence. That calm reaction revealed more about his character than any attempt to prove himself ever could. Moments like that show how women respond to emotional composure. They want to feel like the man they're with can handle social situations without losing his balance. It creates an atmosphere where the interaction feels secure rather than chaotic. If you're listening to this and thinking back to times when a woman's energy shifted after you handled a situation calmly, you've already seen this principle in action. Those moments may have seemed insignificant at the time, yet they often become turning points in how a connection develops. Women don't usually verbalize this preference because it lives beneath conscious explanation. They simply feel the difference between a man whose presence feels grounded and one whose reactions feel unpredictable. That feeling shapes their comfort level in ways that influence attraction over time. If you've noticed that women seem to relax more around you when you stay calm in challenging moments, share that experience in the comments. A lot of men discover this pattern through real interactions rather than through advice. Hearing those stories helps people recognize how powerful emotional steadiness can be. At the end of the day, women want to feel like the emotional space around a man is strong enough to hold the natural ups and downs of life. They may never ask for that quality directly. Their reactions reveal how deeply they value it. Chapter 5. There are moments in a conversation where the energy shifts so gently you almost miss it. Maybe you say something simple, maybe you pause for a second before responding. Maybe you look at her a little longer than usual while she's talking. Something about that moment feels different. The interaction slows down slightly, like the two of you stepped into a quieter space inside the same conversation. Women notice those moments more than men often realize. They notice when a man is actually present rather than just participating. Presence sounds like a vague idea until you experience the difference firsthand. A lot of conversations in modern life happen with divided attention. Phones buzz, thoughts drift. People half listen while preparing what they're going to say next. When a man gives his full attention to a moment, when he's listening without rushing to speak, the interaction begins feeling deeper. Women respond strongly to that kind of focus because it's surprisingly rare. They almost never say out loud that they want a man who is fully present with them. It simply becomes obvious in the way they respond when they feel it. Their tone softens. Their stories become more detailed. They linger longer in the interaction because they feel seen in a way that goes beyond surface-level conversation. You can feel the difference between someone who is waiting for their turn to talk and someone who is genuinely absorbing what you're saying. That difference creates emotional space. Women often open up naturally when they sense that space. They feel like their thoughts matter in the moment rather than being part of a quick exchange. A man who listens deeply without rushing creates an atmosphere where the interaction becomes meaningful. It stops feeling like a series of lines being traded back and forth. It begins feeling like two people sharing an experience in real time. Women are drawn toward that kind of presence because it makes them feel comfortable expressing themselves fully. At the same time, presence includes more than listening. It shows up in how you react to her emotions without becoming overwhelmed by them. If she shares something vulnerable and your reaction remains calm and understanding, she feels safe continuing that openness. If your reaction becomes anxious or overly intense, the moment can feel unstable. Women want to feel like their emotions can exist around a man without creating chaos. That feeling allows deeper connection to grow over time. They may never phrase it this way, yet their behavior reflects it constantly. When they sense emotional steadiness in the man they're with, they begin sharing parts of themselves that they might normally keep guarded. There's also something else women quietly hope to experience with a man. They want to feel appreciated in a way that feels real rather than rehearsed. Compliments can be nice, yet they often feel generic when they're repeated too often or delivered without sincerity. When appreciation appears naturally in the moment, it carries much more meaning. A simple observation about something unique she said or did can stay with her longer than 10 compliments about her appearance. Women notice when a man is paying attention to the details of who they are, rather than focusing only on how they look. That kind of attention signals curiosity about the person behind the surface. Attraction deepens when a woman senses that you actually see her. The small expressions of personality that show up in conversation. When she feels recognized in that way, the connection begins feeling personal rather than generic. You may have experienced moments where a woman seemed pleasantly surprised by something you noticed about her. Maybe you remembered a story she told earlier. Maybe you pointed out something thoughtful she did for someone else. Those small acknowledgments often carry more emotional impact than grand gestures. Women rarely say they want a man to notice those subtle details. Their reaction when it happens reveals how meaningful it feels. They become more engaged in the interaction because they feel understood rather than simply admired. Another quality women quietly appreciate is when a man allows space for the connection to unfold naturally. Some interactions feel rushed because one person is trying to push the moment forward too quickly. When a man moves through the experience patiently, the atmosphere feels relaxed. Conversations grow deeper because neither person feels pressure to perform. That patience communicates confidence. It shows that the man is comfortable letting the interaction develop at its own pace. Women often respond positively to that calm rhythm because it allows genuine chemistry to reveal itself rather than being forced. One man once described a moment that stayed with him for years. He'd been talking with a woman at a small gathering, and the conversation gradually slowed into a quiet exchange about music and memories. There was no rush to impress each other. At one point she paused, smiled softly, and said she liked how peaceful the conversation felt. Nothing dramatic happened in that moment, yet the atmosphere they created together felt meaningful because both people were fully present inside it. The man later realized that the connection deepened because he allowed the moment to exist without trying to control it. Stories like that remind us that attraction often grows in the quiet spaces between words. Women feel drawn toward men who can create those spaces naturally. They want to feel like time slows down slightly when they're with someone who is grounded and attentive. If you're watching this and thinking about a moment where a conversation felt deeper, simply because you stayed present, you've already seen how powerful that quality can be. It transforms ordinary interactions into experiences that people remember long after the conversation ends. Take a second and let me know in the comments if you've ever had an interaction where slowing down and listening actually made the connection stronger. A lot of men discover this truth through moments exactly like that. Hearing those experiences often helps others recognize how much impact simple presence can have. When you combine calm direction, emotional steadiness, respect for your own time, and genuine presence, something interesting happens. Women begin responding to you in ways that feel natural rather than forced. The connection grows quietly because the environment around you feels grounded and authentic. Women may never sit down and list these things explicitly. They reveal their importance through their reactions, through the way they lean closer in conversation, through the way they extend time with you without needing a reason, through the way their curiosity deepens when they feel the atmosphere you create around them. Those quiet responses say more than words ever could.